This is Don Anthony with the Swordsport podcast. I'm joined by Alexander Massialas. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. Obviously, you have a great following in Asia. What is that like when you go there and seeing you in action, seeing you speak Chinese? What is that fan base like for you?
You know, it's interesting because I feel like I go to Shanghai and it kind of feels a little bit like home. You know, that's where my grandma actually was born and raised. Before she immigrated and moved to Taiwan. I still have family in Shanghai. I've been there, you know, as a kid before at training camps, going to see all the sites, going to the different markets. So I feel very comfortable in Shanghai. And then it's kind of even more accentuated when I get there. It's a following that I don't necessarily feel when I'm in the United States because I don't get to interact with a lot of those that fan base on social media or anything. But, you know, I go to Shanghai and then I see tons of people coming out to watch. You know, everyone's asking for photos and, you know, I'm doing interviews in Chinese eventually. And I can, even like on the billboards, people are saying like they had like a revolving whatever China's version of Twitter is feed coming up, and people were saying, you know, using my Chinese name and not my English name and saying like, go Alexander, you know. And it's a weird experience because, as I said before, it's not something I think about too much day to day because I don't have a lot of interaction with them. But when I go to Shanghai, the outpouring of support from the Asian fan base and the Chinese fan base in particular has been so amazing. And I really love going to Shanghai and, you know, competing in front of the fans there. Unfortunately, this time around, I did a little bit worse than the year before when I won it all. but I'm excited to go back this year in a few months and try and go back and go for that gold again.
No, so you are truly a global sports figure at the top of your game. You won the World Cup 2 years in a row. What is that like? What does it take to accomplish that significant feat?
You know, it's just consistency, I guess. For me, that is one of the proudest achievements I've had, just because it goes to show how consistent I am trying to be, you know. There are a lot of people who can come out in men's foil. The field is so deep that we've had so many people come out and medal once or twice, you know, in their career or, you know, in a year but then the next day go back to pools and, you know, or next tournament go back to pools and not make it to the second day because, you know, we have such a strong field. But being able to show that I can have this kind of consistency to go out there and perform well over a course of the season, 2 years running to be the number one fencer in the world is an accomplishment I'm extremely proud of because I've always valued consistency throughout my senior career. I think my ranking has either only gone up or stayed the same. I haven't dropped down at the end of a season, that is, yet for my career. And that's something I'm really proud of. But every fencer is going to hit tough spots here and there. And for me, one of the proudest moments I've had was a year or two into my college career. I just come off a pretty good season where I was, I think, making top 16s pretty regularly and then podium here or there and ranked in the top 16 in the world. But the next season, you know, I dropped a couple bouts in the 64, 32s, really wasn't fencing the same way I felt like I was fencing the season beforehand. And I was feeling pretty down on myself. And I remember I dropped out at 16 at one point, and I had to fence pools for two consecutive tournaments in Venice. Wow. Where Venice I didn't fence particularly well. I made it the second day, but then dropped about, I think, in 64. And then the next time in Seoul, you know, I dropped out of the 64. I was out of the 16 again. I had to fence pools, but, you know, I just went in there. It was like, hey, it's a bad season, but so what? I'm still going to come out and fence my heart out. And I went to that competition, just try and get back into it, trying to enjoy the fencing again, because the previous few competitions, you know, I think I was focusing so much more on the losses than enjoying being out there and competing and fencing. So I just wanted to enjoy fencing and just fence the way I like to fence again. And so I go into Seoul. I think I was the number one seed out of pools, fenced the second day, and, you know, I'm fencing against Chermisnov, who's the reigning world champion at that point. And I'm down 14-10 and in the top 16. But I'm like, okay, well, you know, I've made I made it to the top 16. This is already better than I've done all season. But you know what? I want to go out here and just keep going because I feel good right now. I actually like the fencing I'm doing right now, even though I'm down 14-10. Let's just see where this takes me. And I remember gritting it out and fighting all the way back to 15-14 to beat the reigning world champion and subsequently go on and fence race in the finals of the World Cup in Seoul and actually going on to win my first ever World Cup. So it was funny for me. It was like I just turned around my worst season ever to my best season ever because I was able to not only go from, winning that World Cup, but the next competition in Tokyo 2 weeks later, I came back and the first time ever I had back-to-back medals at competitions by taking a third place in Tokyo. So it was funny because I don't think I'd ever actually got 2 medals in a single season up until that point. So it just goes to show you can turn around a terrible season by just having a good mindset and putting the work in. And, I was able to turn it around my worst season ever into my best season ever at that point. And that kind of mindset shows how much I value consistency because I was able to go out there. I was inconsistent in the beginning of the season, but I finished with a bang, 2 medals, a couple top 16s and then worlds to go back and then raise my world ranking from a season that I thought was lost was pretty amazing for me. And from there on, I tried to just be even more consistent going on. And, that kind of showed itself by the season leading up to Rio, being the number 1 fencer going up into Rio and then finishing the number 1 in the fencer in the world after Rio, though I lost Olympic gold. And then the season after that, I think for me actually I was even more proud of the season afterwards because I went back to school at Stanford. And as I said before, I kind of didn't take as many classes as I probably should have my first 3 years. So I was really struggling with a crazy course load, but still trying to go back to San Francisco on the weekends and some weekdays to train, skipping a couple competitions, skipping Cairo, St. Petersburg, and Bonn that season, but going out and being able to win a tournament and then medal at a few more, medaling in Torino, getting gold at the CIP, which is also an amazing experience in itself, winning such a prestigious event. And then, just having a consistent season from there on. That I think was one of my prouder moments as for my career because I was able to balance so many different things in my life and still be able to, really succeed as a fencer as well.
Oh, that's a great story. I mean, you're truly talking about how persevering over adversity, keeping your mind in the game. And I think you speak on something that in fencing we have to always remember is that it's not the winning, the losing. It's really the enjoying actually the sport and doing what you do. And you took that to a whole new level when you won and then came back and did it again. So
yeah, for me, I just love the journey. That year was one of the toughest years I've gone through, just with schoolwork wise and fencing wise, and a lot of firsts for me. But as I said, I love the journey. I love fencing. I love everything that the sport's given me. And so I think just that mindset is something that allows me to be successful even when things are tough and, I'm going through trying times and such.
I was just thinking about the fact over the last 4 years, outside of the year that you took off for Rio, this is like the first time you've had a little time to yourself. I remember, I think it was NCAA's, your last one. And I remember you saying, all I really want to do is sleep as you're getting ready to go into the Final Four.
Oh, yeah, no, that was a brutal moment for me. I mean, I just got a silver medal in the Anaheim Grand Prix, which, no, that was Long Beach. Sorry, Long Beach Grand Prix. This year's Anaheim. And, obviously I was exhausted from that. But I had to go back from Anaheim straight back to Stanford, take a couple finals, do a couple final reports. We had a couple final projects that I had to build I had to build a robot for one of the classes. I had to build, I actually made a fencing stand for my foils for one class, but, I was trying to put all the final touches and especially the robot. Whenever it comes to mechanical devices, things can be so finicky. So we're up like all night, 2-3 days in a row, trying to 3 nights in a row, trying to really figure out like, why isn't this working, only to get it to work at the last second during the presentation time. And then compounding that with, writing final reports, taking another final as well. the day before I left for the NCAAs. And even the day I left for the NCAAs, I spent the whole morning working on a final report for one of my classes until I, got an Uber and to the airport and got to NCAAs at midnight the day before I was supposed to compete. We had I think 8 a.m. start the next day. So I was running on fumes, like a few hours of sleep. And yeah, that was a brutal time for me, but I'm just glad I was able to go out there and compete in the NCAAs. Obviously, I would have liked to win that day, but clearly it wasn't my day. I do have to say I slept pretty easy the rest of that week because we were on spring break. Definitely didn't try and do anything fancy for spring break. Just trying to rest.
That's good. Well, now that you get to have your rest, you're at home getting ready to prepare for, and not getting ready to, but preparing for Anaheim Grand Prix in 2 weeks. What's that like, and what's your preparation like as we get ready to hopefully see you in California?
Yeah, I'm just going through the same old routine that I kind of did before Rio. Just working out with the Stanford trainers 3 times a week. I make sure to drive down there. Yeah, 3 times a week to work with them. Fencing, 4 or 5 days a week, depending on how my body's feeling. And obviously, I don't want to overtrain and hurt myself. A lot of athletes can really hurt themselves when they're overtraining, when their body's completely fatigued. So, you make that extra long lunge, but your body's fatigued and can't recover from it, and you end up straining a muscle, right? That's the last thing I want to do. But I'm still out here training twice a day most of the time. As I said before, going through the journey, I love it. Fence in the evenings, take lessons with my dad, work out in the mornings at Stanford, and do cardio on the off days that I'm not working with the trainers at Stanford. For me, this is kind of like heaven. I get to just do the sport I love to do, rest when I have downtime, pick up the guitar and try and learn a little bit of guitar in my spare time. For me, it's I couldn't be happier with what's going on right now.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time with me to have this conversation for the Swordsport podcast. Is there anything else you want to add? I asked all the questions, but if you have anything you want to just offer on your own.
Other than, just make sure you come out to Anaheim to support the U.S. men's and women's foil teams. We could always use some hometown support. So whenever we get it, we really cherish the moment. I know in Long Beach last year, I really loved being at home and fencing in front of a crowd, and it really helped me get to gold medal match. Being able to get through some tough bouts when I was down about 13-8 against Ha in the I think quarterfinals.
Yeah.
Against Garotto in a rematch of Rio in the semifinals. That was having a hometown crowd there definitely helped. So just make sure to come out and support. And, if you can't, make sure you tune in on your computers to watch us. And, we're always glad to hear from you guys on Twitter, Instagram, or however you guys can reach us.
Oh, thank you, Alex. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Good luck with the training. Tell your dad and mom I said hi, and just saw your sister a few days ago down at the ACCs.
Yeah.
So she was sort of hobbling around still, so hopefully she'll be back on the good foot after her surgery. And I look forward to seeing you, and thank you for the Swordsport podcast. This is Don Anthony signing off with Mr. Alexander Massialas, 2-time World Cup winner, multiple-time team champion, and right now #1 in the world in team. And it's really a pleasure to have been able to spend some time with you, Alex.
Thanks a lot, Don. Love to be out here with you too.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Swordsport podcast. The Swordsport podcast is a production of Swordsport.tv and is produced and engineered by myself, Don Anthony, and Rick Lotzenheiser. We would like to give a special thank you to the King Arts Complex and their CEO, Demetrius Neely, for providing us a great space to work from in Columbus, Ohio. To subscribe to the Swordsport podcast, check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube.